I'm Ashley Wagasback, feeding therapist, occupational therapist, and lactation consultant. Look forward to discussing all things feeding so that we can support you to bring your little one to their maximum potential so that feeding can be enjoyable for the entire family.
Are you looking for a community of other moms joining together to support their little one through the ups and downs of feeding and gross motor milestones? The Thriving Together community is just for you. Find us on social media at Instagram, Facebook, and www.sensorysolutionsTherapy.com to learn more. We look forward to seeing you. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Feeding Solutions podcast. Today, I have a friend. My guest today is Kim Navarro. She has been a birth worker for over 20 years, and she's committed to bringing better birth options to the Bayou region of South Louisiana. Her passion is helping expectant families feel educated and empowered so that they can have the best birth possible. Kim feels extremely honored to serve expectant families as a doula, childbirth educator, and she's continuing her education as a student midwife. Kim is the founder of the VineZara Foundation, which provides birth support and resources for families of child loss. And she is the owner of Bayou Birth, a South Louisiana business that ensures her community has access to birth resources, including birth and postpartum doulas, childbirth educators, lactation counselors, placenta encapsulation, and more. You are just full of tricks in your bag, so I'm so excited to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, when our paths crossed, I tell people our lunch was supposed to last an hour and it lasted 3. And so it's just so awesome to connect with other people in the community that have similar values and are doing such beautiful work as you. So thank you for coming on today.
Thanks.
So take a moment to tell us a little bit about yourself, but then I guess within that, maybe help listeners understand a bit of the difference between a doula and what a midwife's role is.
Sure. Yeah. So I am a born and bred Louisiana girl. I was born in Pineville, Louisiana. So I'm a country girl at heart. I have been in birth work, like you said, for over 20 years. This fall, it will be 24 years since I attended my first birth in a support role. And that first birth is kind of the catalyst that sent me into birth work. I didn't even know what a doula was. I had attended births of my own, obviously, and, friends and family and things like that. But there was one birth in particular that I was just there to support a friend. And the nurse there was like, "Oh, you're such a great doula. I haven't met you before." And I was like, "What's a doula? I don't even know what that is." So then like that word was stuck into my head and I went home and I looked up what that word meant. And I was like, wow, okay. So I do this and I didn't even know I was doing this. So that's really how it all started. A doula specifically or short is just a support person. So a doula isn't going to do any of the medical care that you would get from a provider. A doula is going to educate you and support you in all the ways that you choose to have your baby and the things that you want for your pregnancy and for postpartum. They're going to physically be there to give you physical support, hip squeezes, and all of the things that make me come home exhausted after a birth. And then a midwife is your care provider. So a midwife is that step between like not having a care provider at all in your pregnancy. Some people do choose to do what they call free birthing, where, they feel for whatever reason that not having a provider or not having their baby in a hospital setting with any kind of formally trained provider is the best decision for them to make for whatever reason. So a midwife is an educated and trained provider, just not an obstetrician. So as a midwife, we don't learn how to do C-sections and, do those kind of specialized care. Simply put, a midwife is the person who specializes in normal, natural, physiological pregnancy and birth. So we love our obstetricians. We love clients that go to OBs because they feel like they want to have that hospital-based birth, or they want that specialized care that they could only get in a hospital. But then we also recognize that birth is a normal, natural, physiological process. And we've done it for thousands of years before obstetricians and hospitals came along. And our bodies are made to do that. So midwives will only care for those women who are not having complicated pregnancies, that don't have a complicated medical history, or there's no reason to foresee there being a complication in their pregnancy or their birth. And then there are different types of midwives. So there's nurse midwives who do serve mostly in the hospital. In Louisiana, we have a couple of nurse midwives that serve out of hospital as well. And then there's CPMs, which is what I'm in school to do. I'm finishing my clinicals, and then I'll get to sit for my exam and become licensed. So those are certified professional midwives. So there's multiple routes to becoming a CPM. You can have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree. There's the PEP route through NARM. There's multiple routes to take to become a midwife. But a doula supports you in a non-medical way. And then your midwife is your provider for you and your baby.
Okay. So you, in your introduction, we talked about lactation. We talked about doula services, like postpartum doulas. Is that all, like you or your staff, like as a doula, they're providing all of those services, or yes?
Yeah, sure. So Bayou Birth, it is me. It started out as just me, and it had been just me for many years. But now we do have other providers that have come on staff with us. Some are just part-time. Doula Robin is like my right hand. I say we like hashtag birth besties and dynamic doula duo. Clients have come up with really cute hashtags for us. She is incredible as well. If you see me, you usually will see Doula Robin as well. We have other backups that work with us, kind of like as a contracted employee of Bayou Birth. I'm very, very particular and very, very cautious over my clients and my business. We have a reputation, and I want to maintain that good reputation, in our medical community and with our clients and with the general public. So I will be really particular about connecting the right client with the right doula. I tell people in interviews that I'm not the right doula for everyone, and that's okay, as it should be. I don't think that every client's the right client for me, and I don't think that I'm the right doula, for every client. So there has to be like some respect there in, personalities and what matters to that client, and if I align well with their beliefs and morals and values, and all of those things come into play there. So we have staff. There's people on our support team that all they do is answer emails, and then there's people that all they do is keep track of payments and finances, and so it's a business like any other business. But for the most part, if you see faces of Bayou Birth, it's going to be myself and Robin. Robin holds a couple of certifications that I don't hold because it's just not like my cup of tea. Robin is trained for Body Ready Method.
Okay.
I don't have any desire to be trained in Body Ready Method, but she is, and our clients get the best of that, right? So we complement each other really well, and we provide services as we see fit for our clients. And as the demand builds, placenta encapsulation is a good example of that, because just a few years ago, I had probably only done 2 or 3 placentas. It's not something that's super popular here, but if you drive an hour and a half up the road in New Orleans, everybody's having their placenta encapsulated. I have a friend, Sarah, that does placenta encapsulation in the Baton Rouge area, and like ton of her business is just placenta encapsulation.
Mhm.
So we are trained and able to do a lot of those services. And it really just depends on who is best at that service and who. Now, obviously, if a client has a preference, if they just like Robin's personality better than my personality, then sure, like you get doula Robin. Robin loves postpartum work, that she thrives in postpartum work. She loves supporting moms and babies postpartum. Not that I don't love it, but it's just not my jam. Like labor and birth and education and advocating for yourself and things like that are my jam.
Mhm.
So I am capable of doing it all, but I don't have to do it all. And that's where building my team comes in.
Yeah, I mean, how wonderful, how freeing to give more options to the community. And that's what it's all about. So that kind of leads me into my next question, like your mission behind all of this. Like, what is your mission in this, in the birthing space?
Better birth is possible in the Bayou region. I feel like if there was a tagline for a business, that's probably mine. If you're on Facebook, because I'm old, so I'm more Facebook than all of my clients are like, you really have to get more active on Instagram because the women that are younger and having babies are on Instagram. I'm a grandma over here on Facebook. But like if you look up the hashtag better birth is possible on Facebook, I promise you my posts are what you're gonna find.
Love that.
So yeah, it's really it's a mountain I'm willing to die on, right?
Mhm.
That I tell my clients all the time, policies, procedures, and preferences are not the law. Just because your hospital says, oh, it's our policy that you have to do A, B, C, that's not the law. And their policies are based on previous litigation or mitigating liability, and there's a time and a place for all of that. I have to do that myself, definitely.
Yeah.
However, when we're starting to see more negative birth outcomes because we're more worried about policies and procedures and preferences than we are about normal natural physiological birth, and Louisiana is one of the worst states for morbidity and mortality rates for moms and babies, like this is unacceptable and we have to do something to change it.
Yeah, no, I mean that, of course, from time to time you'll hear the story of like so and so's baby passed or whatever, just like a hospital birth or whatever, home birth, but it's not to think that Louisiana is just as a whole struggling in that area. It does. It's mind boggling to me. So, in 2025, that we would still be having such struggles in that area. It's scary. So I'm so happy that again, this is the mission. Your work is to help women and empowering them to have more choices and to be able to do better and to think for themselves and just to have better outcomes. Absolutely. Yeah. So I work with tons of moms in the breastfeeding space, and you do as well. So how are you supporting moms and empowering them to breastfeed their babies after babies are delivered?
Sure. So statistically, if you looked at statistics of women who have doulas versus women who don't have doulas, breastfeeding at least 1 week of breastfeeding at least 6 weeks to breastfeeding at least 6 months, and then continued breastfeeding to up a year and beyond. Statistically, women who use doulas or have doula support are going to have like a 30% higher rate of breastfeeding or prolonged breastfeeding than women who don't have that support. And what that looks like is, I'm not a lactation consultant. Again, I wear a lot of hats, but I don't have to wear them all. However, as a student midwife, I have to take all of the lactation classes. As a doula, you have to learn about lactation and the anatomy of the breast and the things that work and the things that don't. And then I'm a mom that did breastfeed. So I've been there. I've been postpartum. I've been, there's different fluids coming out of every orifice in my body, and I'm miserable and I just hate life right now. And I know how that feels. So just having someone there,
Mhm.
just, they say statistically, if you have a warm body in the room when you're having your baby that's just on your side, you are like twice as likely to have a positive birth outcome, regardless of what the form or the mode of that birth is.
Mhm.
We can have a complicated birth. We can have what would be considered a negative birth outcome, as far as, oh, well, my goal is to have a natural birth, but instead I ended up having, a medicated birth, or I had to have an emergency C-section, or whatever that is. If you have doula support, then you're going to view that as a more positive experience. And with breastfeeding, that's the same. So for our clients, we're talking about breastfeeding beforehand. As a
Mhm.
doula, we're going to meet with our clients at least twice before they have their baby. We're going to do those prenatal appointments where we're talking about their birth goals, and then we're talking about what does immediate postpartum look like. We're going to educate them on breastfeeding a little bit. We encourage them to also do like breastfeeding classes and things like that. That is one of the things that's on the horizons for Value Birth. Is we're going to start doing a more formal breastfeeding education for the clients as well.
Okay.
And then when they have their baby, we, in our contract, it says like, once you have your baby, we're not walking out the door, right? So we're going to stay and support you for that golden hour at least. And then we're making sure that you get latched with your baby. So you're getting that support of, a hospital may have a lactation consultant on staff, but if that lactation consultant's in with someone else or they're teaching a class, you may be on day 3 of your hospital stay before you meet hospital lactation.
Right.
So when you have birth support, we're staying and we're going to make sure you latch, and we're going to talk to you about, making sure we're lining up baby's ear with baby's shoulder and baby's shoulders with baby's hip,
Yeah.
so that we're in a good alignment for good digestion. And, doing all of that education with someone that you have a relationship with. It's not a stranger and a random person that just walks in and says, hey, this is my name and I'm with lactation at the hospital. And then they give you this ton of information where it feels like you're, drinking through a fire hydrant, and you're hormonal and you have all the postpartum things happening, and you're not going to remember any of that information they
Right.
gave you because it's a stranger giving you this information. So we're there and we have that relationship already established with them. And then when, it's 2 a.m. and they're miserable, and it's, I'm home and it's day 4, because day 4 is always the toughest day for mamas postpartum, and their mature milk has come in and their hormones are going crazy and they just don't know whether they're coming and they're going. Then they get to call their doula and they say, this is what's going on and I think I'm crazy. And then we support them emotionally
Yes.
and we tell them they're not crazy and that everybody goes through this and it's pretty typical. And then we can come in and do that initial assessment if we do start having some complications,
Mhm.
or the oral tissues change so much in a baby in that first few weeks of life, and they're going to get that basic assessment at the hospital, and then the pediatrician might, not all of them do, the
Mhm.
pediatrician might look at their mouth, but then we can come in and, we're at day 2 or day 10 and the baby's changed from how they looked when the hospital, looked at them. So then we can look at a mom and say, it looks like we might have some tight oral tissue. So I think you should go get assessed.
Yeah.
Or, like your position looks great and your baby's latch looks great. And I don't really see any tight tissues. So I think we need to like move you over to go and see Miss Pam or go and see Olivia. And like, let's get a lactation consultant involved here.
Yeah.
So it's, assessing what's going on with them to the scope of our practice that it allows us to do that, giving them the resources that we have, and
Mhm.
then referring them to the people that we know that can support them in a way that we can.
Yeah, and the funnel that you can triage people beyond what your services are, that brings so much peace that the
Sure.
mom doesn't have to figure this out. Because I mean, again, like that's one of the things that I see with moms, that they're overwhelmed with all the things that they have to just figure out and learn. The learning curve is so steep, and just to have that doula support for you beyond just the birth to say, okay, yeah, I do. I see what you're experiencing. Yes, let's go this direction, is it takes some of the thinking out of it. You're a trusted person. They're gonna feel
Sure.
comfortable in your recommendations. So I do have a question about placental encapsulation, and just explain a little bit more of what that is, and are there contraindications to when women should use that? Um, I did it with my third and fourth child. No, maybe just my fourth. I can't even remember. Maybe anyway, I did it with one or two of my babies. And but again, like at that point, I was just kind of like, you should try this, but I really wasn't educated a ton on the benefits. So give us a little bit more information on that.
So the thing about placenta encapsulation is there's no like studies
Hmm.
done medically, officially anyway. I have my own theories about, how regulations come about and how pharmaceutical companies, only want to do the things they can benefit from. So I'll save you my conspiracy theories. But so this is the thing with placenta encapsulation is we are the only mammals that don't consume our placentas. So, and look, I'm a Christian. I believe that things, God doesn't make mistakes in his design of us. Um, so we know that biologically your placenta contains hormones and, it's the baby's organ, technically. A lot of the placenta and the DNA from the placenta comes from dad, not necessarily mom. A little bit more than comes from mom, comes
Okay.
from dad, but it's the baby's organ and it's the first organ that mom and baby share. So there's a ton of benefits, stem cells and hormones and all of those things that are in the placenta. And the studies that have been done on it, not like, peer reviewed journal article kind of studies, but the companies or, organizations that have studied it, it's proven, it shows that we help with, the mom's milk supply. It helps regulate hormones. There's some studies that are being done right now, which it takes a little while to do these studies, that they're showing some benefit of women that do placenta encapsulation. And then all they do is like leave it in a jar and throw it in their freezer. And then they use it during menopause, that it helps with those menopausal symptoms. And we're
Oh,
not having as many
wow.
hot flashes and we're not having,
Oh,
all those hormone changes during menopause and things like that. So there's tons of evidence out there that there's these benefits for women. And I've had clients like you that I encapsulated with some of my births, but I didn't encapsulate with the others. And irrefutable, what we see is the women who have placenta encapsulation done or that consume their placenta in one way or another. The encapsulation is the only thing we're doing, but there are other ways that they consume them out there. The women who do placenta encapsulation are reaping the benefits of a quicker postpartum recovery, those hormones stabilizing a little bit better, not having as drastic reactions to the hormone fluctuations that are naturally supposed to happen, and things like that. Some people on the flip side argue that placenta encapsulation and consuming your placenta is unnatural for humans. And again, I go back to the argument that while I understand in nature, in the wild, there's an argument that animals will consume their placentas to hide evidence of birth. And we're not in the wild, so we don't have to do that. I don't I don't argue that may be true, but also like the blood is still there from their birth.
mm,
So we're hiding some of the evidence of the birth, but not all of it.
okay.
And it still goes to reason that these wild animals that have no influence whatsoever, like nobody's interfering, there's nothing going on with them, they understand the benefits of consuming your placenta to take all those hormones back into your body to help with all of the things that it helps with. um and at the end of the day, if a person feels like, hey, I might have had a really rough postpartum period with this baby, and I want to do everything I can to try and not have that same rough experience, then like let them try placenta encapsulation. It's fine. As far as contraindications, if there's certain infections that mom may have or that baby may have that we wouldn't want to consume the
Sure.
placenta. There are certain, if you're having a hospital birth, there are certain birth outcomes where the hospital prefers to send your placenta to the lab, to pathology, to have tests ran on it, to get an idea if they have, if there's anything in the placenta that would give them an explanation, especially if you're going to continue fertility journey. And let's say this is my first baby and we have this peculiar birth outcome, or this baby has this anomaly, and we want to get an idea if we know why this is happening, then sometimes the placenta is the key to that information. So in those situations, and then just there could be some medical history for mom where we would advise against consuming the placenta.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you for that information. That was educational for me. Obviously, being in the role that you are, doula and student midwife, you like things to unfold naturally and with as few interventions as possible. So, again, like we know there's so many benefits of baby descending through the birth canal, and even after delivery for some babies to engage in a little bit of like the birth crawl. And so like a lot of the infants that I see who are dealing with feeding difficulties have these oral restrictions and body tensions. So a lot of what I'm educating is just getting the baby moving, getting them on their belly. How do you get moms and dads moving in that direction, as far as like it's okay to put your baby on their bellies, and just getting them out of containers or these positions that might limit their movement?
Sure. So we love baby wearing, right? So that's usually where the conversation starts, is because at some point, whether I'm a doula or a student midwife, whatever role I'm in, we're going to eventually talk about baby wearing. Even if it's not, if we don't have the opportunity to have that conversation when we're talking about birth and the immediate postpartum after birth and things like that, we will have the opportunity to have that question when we talk about baby wearing. And then I just remind mamas, we talk about, the flat head, and like if your baby stays in this position for too long, and, the things that cause, the different complications that we see in the newborn. And when we talk about baby wearing, we talk about, the natural movements of a baby, and making sure that we're not restricting those movements, and making sure we want to wear our baby. That's great, but we want to still give the baby time and space to move around. And we talk about, extending the neck, and making sure their neck's not like this, because, then we're restricting the airway, and we're restricting, their movement and things like that. And usually, for lack of a better way to say it, I kind of play on like the mom guilt maybe. And I do that as a doula and as a student midwife too. There's a certain point in labor where I'm like, it's really not about you right now, it's about what your baby needs, right? So like, and that tugs at mom's heart, right? Like, what's best for my baby? Like, I would go to the mat for my baby, I would die for my baby. So yeah, I'm gonna suck it up and listen to them cry a little bit and be uncomfortable because I put them on tummy time. But then it opens up to, well, if your baby's that uncomfortable during tummy time, now we need to talk about going to see a chiropractor, and we need to talk about going to see OT, and what are the next steps that we should take? Because I say all the time that words matter. You'll hear myself and Doula Robin say that words matter, and what we're saying to ourselves and what we're saying to other people. This is how we break bad habits and generational curses. This is how we change culture. Words matter. And just because something is typical does not mean it's normal. We have to stop telling moms, oh, it's normal for your baby to ABCXYZ. Just because lots of babies do it does not mean it's normal. It's the same thing as like, oh, it's normal for you to pee on yourself every time you sneeze after you give birth. No, it's not. Just because every other woman in your family has done it does not mean it's normal. That is not how your body was made to function. So those are the kind of conversations that when those conversations start, it opens us up to allowing us to talk to moms about, your baby needs to be able to move their head both ways this way. Oh, my neck popped when I did that. Your baby needs to be able to move both ways, this way and that way. And, your baby shouldn't, favor one side versus the other, and, things like that. I went to visit a friend of mine, one of my best friends. Her daughter has a baby now, and she was in town. She surprised her mom over Mother's Day. I wasn't her doula. She lives in Texas now. I was there as a friend. I was visiting, but I'm holding the baby. And of course, my brain is assessing this baby, and like, he favors looking one way over the other. And I tried to position him to force him to turn the other way. And he, kind of resented me for that. And like, his hands were clenched a lot. And I was like, when you get home, I need you to find a chiropractor that specializes in pediatric care. And I need that chiropractor to assess this baby, because your baby's behaviors are not typical.
Yeah.
And, like, this isn't normal for your baby to behave this way. And like, I get that you have an oversupply, and yay, he's a chunky monkey because he's growing well, but that doesn't mean that he's thriving. So it's just like things like that. It's having those conversations that just educate them. I don't think that there is, I don't think that moms resist finding other care providers or doing the things that are best for their babies for, any other reason than just because they just don't know. Agreed. Education is important.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So again, that leads me into the next question of valuable information, valuable tips that you feel moms in the pregnancy, even what they're thinking about, maybe that baby might be in the future. What's some information, some valuable tips that you would want them to know early on?
Sure. This keeps coming up and keeps coming up and keeps coming up. And I feel like it's just another, like, we're right on the precipice of maybe something new for Bayou Birth, because I keep getting told, man, I never knew that. I wish I would have known that before I was pregnant. Oh man, I wish somebody would teach a class of people before pregnancy or in early pregnancy. So it keeps coming up and coming up and coming up to me that, like, this is something that needs to be taught to people before they have babies. Mm. And in our medical model of care, the biggest thing is, like, these obstetricians have to see so many patients to be able to maintain their business. Mm-hmm. And I get that. They have to do that. Mm-hmm. And there's women out there that need to see an obstetrician because of their medical history or because of the circumstances around their pregnancy. And that's valid. Not everybody's meant to have a home birth. Not everybody's meant to birth in a birth center. Not everybody's meant to birth with a midwife. But, like, at the end of the day, education is key, because you might have I love my OBGYN. Like, he's an incredible guy, and he's done incredible things. And I refer lots of clients to him, but at the end of the day, he's got a job to do. Yeah. Right. And we're not best friends. He's going to tell me what I need to hear. And I'm going to see him for the 15 or 20 minutes and sometimes 30 minutes that it takes for him to give me the appropriate care for whatever I go to see him for. And then he's moved on to the next client. Mm-hmm. And when you don't know better, we don't know what we don't know until we know it. So if you don't know better, even the most well-intending provider is not going to give you fully informed consent unless you have to go and educate yourself first. Mm-hmm. Unless you sit there and say, really, because there's a study that I read that said whatever, or, well, I understand that that's what you typically do or what you prefer to do, or I understand that that's what the policy says we do, but I'm not comfortable with that because, and I had this conversation recently with a provider that works at one of our local hospitals. I was their doula, and it was their third baby. And they took our birth education class, and it was the first time. Well, no, that's not true. They took a hospital-based birth education class. And then they took my birth education class with their third pregnancy. They had some very specific goals that they wanted to reach with this baby. This is maybe their last pregnancy. They're probably finish having babies. They're not sure, but so they just wanted to do a couple of things differently. And I was teaching the class, and she's a nurse and he works in the hospital as a provider. And they're looking at each other like, did you know that?
Wow.
Did you know that? I didn't know that. Like, it doesn't matter who you are. I guarantee you there's things about pregnancy, birth,
Sure.
labor, all of those things that you don't know. And you have to educate yourself. Like, that would be the biggest thing. If there's a hill I'm going to die on, it's education. Hire a doula. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't need to hire a doula because whatever it might be. I have lost, I can't even count at this point, potential clients because either the mom says, oh, well, my husband's super sweet and he's very supportive and he's going to be my doula. Okay, great. Like, I'm not going to argue with you. I know the benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
I'm not bashing the men not at all. I mean,
right.
But yeah.
And then, or I'll have this happened recently. This mom's still pregnant. She hasn't had her baby yet. And it's happened countless times over the years where I'll interview with a client and they'll love me. And, okay, well, we have to wait to hire you or to sign contracts because we have to wait till he gets paid again. Or, we have to wait a certain amount of time just because, or I want to talk to my provider first.
Yeah.
And, make sure they're comfortable with me having a doula. And then the client doesn't hire me. Mm-hmm. And then I see they go on to have this really typical high intervention, chaos driven birth that I know, not because I'm being prideful and not because I have this complex, but because I just know, because the studies tell us that someone who has doula support, that you have this relationship with this person and that person knows the ins and outs of dealing with these providers and dealing with labor and delivery nurses and dealing with the system and dealing with labor and birth and what might be a complication versus what's not really a complication. And, all of the fear mongering that comes with birthing, and things like that. Like, when you have someone in your corner that at the end of the day, all I want is to see mom and baby healthy. And that means mental health too. Mm. That at the end of the day, your birth goals are the first and foremost thing on my mind. That makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I feel like, and I feel like when you have a doula present, there's a lot of unspoken assumptions that happen if you're in the hospital, that there's a lot of things you're probably automatically not going to have to deal with from just the natural functioning of a hospital birth. If they know, oh, she's hired a doula, that I know where she stands.
Yeah.
And so
that is true, but it kind of goes both ways. And there was a really unfortunate situation recently that comes to mind, but for the most part, that's true. So I myself personally attend a lot of births as a doula at the Thibodeau Hospital. I know a lot of the labor and delivery nurses at the Thibodeau Hospital. For the most part, when I come walking in with a client, most of those nurses know, okay, she's with Kim. That means this is probably the list of what her birth goals are. And sometimes you can see it on their face. They're surprised when I say, nope, mom wants to get an epidural. We just want to try and go as long as we can without it. Or we want to try and get to transition before we get that epidural. Or we can, and usually you'll see like surprise on their face. Like, oh, wait, this isn't like the typical thing that we see you coming with.
Yeah. Okay.
But then also I feel like there's a negative connotation that does come along with doulas. And that's, I feel like I'd be like doing a disservice if we didn't address that as well, because there are some doulas out there that step way outside of their scope of practice and they are inappropriate with hospital staff or with providers or whatever it might be. There's some horror stories out there that, have happened. Thank God, as far as I know, not in our local area. There's only a few of us, there's not a lot of doulas in our area. So I feel like that kind of protects us a little bit from some of those horror stories. But in our state, yes, I know at one of the hospitals in New Orleans and one of the hospitals in Baton Rouge, I've heard, oh my gosh, a doula got kicked out of our hospital and she's not allowed to come back in the hospital because, and they tell these stories of the things that these doulas are doing that are completely inappropriate, and they're complete, it's just not in your scope of practice to do those things. And so it is this fine line that we have to walk. And then unfortunately, there is the complete other side of that, where there are providers, even locally, that don't want to see me walk in the door. There are providers that are going to have a chip on their shoulder as soon as when they get report from that labor and delivery nurse and they say, oh, she has a doula. There are providers that are going to have an attitude as soon as they walk in your hospital room, because they think and they assume that certain things are happening, and those things aren't true. They're just not true. And for whatever reason, they don't want to have those conversations and say like, hey, can we talk about this? Or, whatever that might be. Or they just make an assumption that when a client stands up for herself and is educated, that it's because the doula is telling her to do that. And those things aren't true either, at least in our part. I can only speak, for our business. Yeah. And we've seen it firsthand. We've witnessed providers come in and act very disrespectfully and very unprofessionally to women that are in labor, because they just don't like that they're being questioned, or that, moms are giving them pushback.
Yeah, well, that's a plug for a reason why getting educated, even maybe before you get pregnant, and really figuring out like what you want, what you desire for your birth. Because if doula support is what you desire and maybe your current provider is not in alignment with that, then it gives you an opportunity to kind of to shift a bit. So so what are some painful maybe things that you wish could have gone differently, or information that you wish people can have because of maybe negative experiences you've had in the past in your journey as a birth worker?
Well, I think the big thing for me is informed consent. That again, that's another hill I'll die on. I feel like there's a lot of them. But informed consent, I teach this in my class. It's a whole slide in my birth education class, because it is that important that informed consent is not just a perk, it's the law. And we have providers out here every day breaking the law. And we need to stand up against that. And we need to challenge them, because historically, change comes with revolution, right? When we have enough people giving you kickback, when we have enough people saying, no, this is not okay. So, whether it's a midwife or an OBGYN or just your general GP, like a PCP, no matter who they are, if they have a license to do medicine, then they have a governing body, and they have this set of laws and regulations that they have to abide by. And informed consent is on every one of them, regardless of what you have. Informed consent that you have to give parents. We usually have regulations of informed consent documents that we have to provide for them, if not have them sign. Right. Informed consent is not a perk. So a doctor walking into your room saying, I'm going to do whatever, that's not informed consent. So we teach our moms the BRAIN acronym in our class. We teach them how to have those. We help facilitate those conversations, or teach them how to have those conversations. There's lots of people that we've opened our classes to the general public now. So there's lots of people that take our classes, but don't hire a doula, whether it's us or another doula. So we teach them how to have those conversations with their provider. And then if we are their doula, then we're facilitating those conversations for them. We can't speak for them. We can't make, decisions for them. I will even be on the minority side of saying that the word advocating is one of those words that just makes me feel like ew, because if I do my job before you go into labor, I shouldn't have to advocate for you while you're in labor. If I educate you properly and I empower you properly, then I'm not going to have to do much advocating for you. And if I do have to step into that role of advocating for you, then like it's going to be when we've exhausted all of the other things. So for me, the big thing in all of the negative experiences that I've had as a doula, in our local hospital specifically, would be where the provider comes in and just does not have a desire, or for whatever reason just chooses not to provide informed consent and have a mutual respectful conversation with the person that's in labor.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Thank you for that being a hill that you're willing to die on, because it is so important. It is, because it does. It literally could be the turning point for a mother's birth.
Yeah. And I mean, if we think about what normal, not natural physiological birth is, it's all a dance of hormones, right? Like that, when you break it down, it's literally just a dance of hormones and then this beautiful dance of baby's movements. Mm-hmm. That is what birth is in a nutshell. And when we have moms that are staying in that sympathetic nervous system, when they're staying in fight or flight, when they're staying in that frontal cortex part of their brain, and they can't, get into that place of allowing those natural hormones to flow because they feel like they're constantly having to fight for every single thing that they want in birth, we're robbing women of the natural birth experience that they deserve.
It's a beautiful picture that I was able to kind of form in my head. So yeah, that's great. That's really beautiful. So as far as advice you would give to moms who are considering using a doula, childbearing years, what would you say to them?
Interview more than one doula. Mm-hmm. And that seems so funny. And people look at me like I'm crazy when I say that, because I am not out here to just like fill up my calendar. And I'm not out here to just, I want to be everyone's doula. Yeah. I'll ask couples, have you interviewed any other doulas? Have you reached out and spoken to any other? I really would. I used to say, oh no, you can't hire me until you talk to somebody else. Yeah. I just don't have time for that anymore. But, like do your homework, educate yourself, learn your doula's personality, learn where their values lie, because it's okay if you don't align with them, but you don't want to find out that you don't align with them while you're in labor.
Very true.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the other thing would be just realizing, I tell people all the time, the misconception, I think, that's out there that people really, really need to understand about doulas in general. And I can only speak specifically for myself. And I think it's okay for me to speak for Doula Robin as well. We align a lot, but we're not natural birth Nazis. We're not. And you'll hear moms all the time say, oh, well, I don't need to hire a doula because I know I want an epidural, or I don't need to hire a doula because this will be my third C-section. And nothing could be further from the truth. I have mamas that have C-sections. I have mamas that have epidurals. Mm-hmm. I have told mamas that are going to have a natural birth, their goal is to have an unmedicated birth. And I've looked them in the face and said, no, you need to get an epidural. There is a time and a place for all the things. We talk about that in our birth education class, that like, it's just tools in the toolbox. We look at interventions as a bad word, and that's not necessarily what it is. It's a tool in the toolbox, and there's an appropriate time and place for those tools. I have mamas that wouldn't have had the beautiful birth experience that they had if they hadn't had their epidural. I have had mamas that have had C-sections that saved their babies' lives. Those things are true. And you need to find a doula that aligns well with your philosophies. Even if you don't know what your philosophies are yet, I promise you, if you interview 2 or 3 doulas, you'll figure them out along the way. Yeah. You really you need to realize that not all doulas are birth Nazis. I myself and Doula Robin definitely are not natural birth Nazis. And we really do just want for the birth culture in the Bayou region to change in a positive way. I feel like that needs to be clarified because birth culture is changing, all right, but it's not going in the right direction. So we really just want there to be better birth options, and for the birth culture to change in general.
Well, is there anything else that we maybe didn't hit on today that you would want to share with with these potential new clients and the audience?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing would be don't wait.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I am one person and I wear lots of hats, and Robin is one person and she wears lots of hats. And we're seeing more and more lately that we have people reaching out to us that are 36 weeks pregnant and, 32 weeks pregnant, and they missed out on that birth education, and they missed out on all of the supportive pregnancy, that you get during pregnancy. And then they get to that end of your pregnancy time in that third trimester where your doctor's wanting to do this and your doctor wants you to do that. And your doctor's talking to you about these things and that. And now the conversations aren't going the way I thought they would go. And I didn't even know that this was a thing. And now I'm panicking. So I'm looking for somebody to come in and be a savior. And I'm looking for somebody to come in and save my experience. And it's never too early or too late to hire a doula. I tell people that all the time. I had a client hired me 2 days before she had her baby once.
Yeah.
It's never too late,
yeah.
But you're missing out. And you're really robbing yourself of some of the peace that you can have in your pregnancy. Yes. When you have that doula support, even if it's just that emotional support that we provide during pregnancies. Right before we got on this call, I had a mom that called me and I answered the phone and she's crying. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to be late for my podcast now. But I had to stop what I was doing and address the fears and the concerns that mom had because of an appointment that she had. Mm-hmm. And everything she was feeling was valid, but it was not the end of the world. Like, in that moment, she felt like it was. And then when we got off the phone, she was like, I'm so thankful to have you because this is what you're providing to me. I haven't even provided her with birth support yet, but she walked out of a doctor's office or a facility after an ultrasound, panicking and disappointed and feeling all these big feelings. And of course, she called her husband and told him. And then the husband was like, well, have you called the doula? What did the doula say? Good job. Good job, Dad. And she did. Like, she called me in tears and panicking and all of the things. And by the time the conversation was over, she was like, okay, I feel better now. So sometimes it's just about having that resource, that in between, because your doctor's office is going to answer at 2 a.m. their answering service, and they're going to say, if this is not an emergency, this can wait till tomorrow. But sometimes it may not be a physical emergency, but in your brain, it may be an emergency, right? So use the resource that you have. We have doulas in our community. We're not the only ones. We don't have enough. If anybody's interested in being a doula, come let me know. I'll let you know what it looks like in real life, and then we'll see if that works for your lifestyle. But if moms would just reach out earlier in their pregnancies, and then also you have longer to pay your, you don't have to come up with as much money at once. If use the thing, you're paying the same price regardless of when you hire a doula. So get your money's worth, hire us sooner.
Very true. Well, where can people find you? You mentioned that y'all do birth classes in addition, like to support moms and prepare them. So, so people can find out all that you offer.
Sure. So they can go on our website. It's just BayouBirth.com. Really simple. It's the name of the business.com. Facebook, because I'm old. Yes. I try Instagram. I do have Instagram. I don't even know what my Instagram, you're going to have all that information. You said you, yeah. I had to go back into my social medias and look at what the handles were so that I could provide that.
That's funny.
But so the page is Bayou Birth as well. And then just reach out, like however you want to reach out to us. You can email us. It's BayouBirthDoulas@gmail.com is our email. I do have help with checking emails and things like that.
Wonderful.
So, yeah, you might have a better a better chance at getting someone.
Yeah.
I'm up and awake a lot and attending a lot of births, so I can't always like answer immediately, but one of the girls might be able to answer basic questions. And we do teach the childbirth education series that we're teaching. It's 2-hour classes, sometimes like 2.5 hours technically is what they're scheduled to be, but I try to hit that 2-hour mark because dad's brains just turn off at that point.
Yeah.
So it's a 4-week course.
Okay.
So we teach that at the Pearl Chiropractic Company in Thibodaux. When we have a big group of Homa, doula Robin and I are both stationed in Homa as well. So when we have a big group that's only Homa people, then we can use Paisley Park in Homa. Okay. We use that location if we have a lot of people that are just in Homa, but mostly it's taught at the Pearl Chiropractic in Thibodaux. And yeah, people can just reach out and let us know if they have questions.
Perfect. Well, thank you for all of this information. My brain has definitely filled in some gaps that were there before. So I'm excited to have this interview as a great resource to share with the community. So thank you again for your time. I know you're so busy, and I'm grateful for your time to be here today.
Thank you, Ashley. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Till next time.
I hope you found this episode on the feeding solutions helpful. If you would like more information, please follow Sensory Solutions on Facebook or Instagram, or you can always visit our website at www.sensorysolutionsTherapy.com. Thanks so much for joining today, and look forward to seeing you next time.